So what I'd like to share is that the search for longevity has been from the beginning of time. As soon as people had death, they wanted to seek for life. And many of you have heard of the fountain of youth. Anyone's heard of that term? Wow, you've just found the fountain of youth. And I'm like, yes, I have. She's sitting right there in the front row. It's my wife, Ashley. Yes, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Ponce de Leon was the explorer that was looking for the literal fountain of youth. But although he didn't find the fountain of youth, we've still been searching to this day. Unfortunately, in this modern day and age, we look for it in different ways. Have you seen people who get these injections for their lips or for their eyes, right? To get rid of those wrinkles, to get rid of the things that show that they are aging. Did you know that my colleagues in plastic surgery, although the economy has taken a huge hit, they still are making plenty of money, and that is not covered by insurance. They're getting cash to make these changes in people's appearance. And people may say, well, I would never get surgery or I would never get an injection, but would you dye your hair? Perhaps you would dye your hair. Because the reason why I want people to think about this is because you were not meant to die. You were not meant to go gray. So that concerns you, right? That concerns your inner peace, if that makes sense. And a lot of people will say, no, that's just society saying that. No, it's not. To a certain extent, it is right here. In fact, even in the animal kingdom, if life was just a part, along with death, then why would elephants mourn the loss of one of their own? Do you realize that? Do you realize animals weep and cry and mourn when one of them dies? But in the evolutionary standpoint, that death is a good thing, right? Because survival of the fittest, get rid of the sickly ones. But that's not true. We weren't meant to die. So I went on this exploration on my own. I'll show you this for a minute. I have a mole on my palm, okay? That's a very uncommon place to have a mole. Don't worry, I've checked it out with my derm colleagues. It's not malignant. It's not grown in 20 years. I developed it because I got a piece of gravel in my hand when I had a bike accident, and then after that, I had a mole appear there. So it's not grown, it's fine. But what I did is I started noticing with certain behaviors and attitudes and different things that I was doing that my hair, which started to go gray when I was an intern after I graduated from Loma Linda, it started to turn black again. Now, I don't know if you can see, but if you take a look at this mole, I put the root here. Can you see the root? But do you see what color it was? And what's very interesting is that I've never dyed my hair in my entire life. And in fact, even the last 2 days, what did we find recently, babe? New hairs that were turning black. So I'll just give you some examples here. I have a little marker that's about 3/4 of a centimeter here, but you can see the root, right? And you can see the black, and you see that it was gray. But some people will say, well, but that hair there is going gray. So isn't that something negative? See how it's black up here, and then it starts to get gray near the root. I said, this is just as helpful as the other. You know why? It tells me what not to do. Because I know how quickly my hair grows. My hair grows a little bit more than 1 centimeter per month. So in other words, every day is 1/3 of a millimeter. So I can actually calculate this, and my wife has a neat way of doing it. How do you figure out what was going on at that time generally? We look at the pictures on our picture roll, and we kind of figure out what was going on at that time. So here are some other just examples of gray and then to black. This one was gray here on the tip. It was kind of thin here, but then it got very thick here. Here's another one, kind of almost a little wavy, gray, back to black. So these are just kind of examples to try to encourage you. This one is extremely significant. This one was quite translucent and then dark black at the end. And some people will say, well, I never dye my hair, right? Well, but do you use makeup, right? Maybe a little foundation, little crow's feet. It is something that all of us look at to some level or another. We're concerned when we see markers of aging in our lives. And I'll ask you this question. When you look at somebody, how can you tell how old they are? What are things you look at? Sure, wrinkles and their gray hair. Anything else? Skin, but what areas of their skin particularly? Their hands and their face. And you know what's interesting? Ellen White, the prophet of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, has a vision where she sees Lucifer as he was and as he now is. Did you know that? And she says something very specific. She says he has a noble figure because he is an angel, though fallen. She says from his eyebrows, his forehead recedes, interestingly. And she says the flesh hangs loosely, but specifically two places. Do you remember what she mentions? Where was it? Hands and his face. Very similar. So the enemy is also aging. Do you realize that? Because he does not have access to the tree of life. But since he is an angel, he has a different nature than us. So he's over time degenerating. And what is up here in your brain? What's this part of your brain responsible for? Your frontal lobe. What do you do with the frontal lobe? That's reason. That's decision making, right? That's judgment. That's morality, right? So that's the concept. My wife's area is skin. This is my beautiful wife on our wedding day. And I want to just share a little part of the journey, not just with hair, but with skin. We were doing a presentation in one of the neighboring conferences, one of your sister conferences nearby. And while we were there talking about the health message, you had a time when you could not sleep at all. Why was that, Ashley? Your ear was itching, really? And so this is actually a picture of her ear. This is where her piercing was. Praise God, she does not wear earrings anymore. But this is the area. Can you see this little circle here? That was an area, and I looked at it and I said, that's eczema. Anyone ever had eczema or heard somebody who had eczema before? Well, how do we usually treat that? I'll give you a joke, okay? But this is actually kind of serious. This is a joke that one of my colleagues said. I talked to one of my dermatology colleagues, and I said, give me a little dermatology review. If it's wet, you dry it. If it's dry, you wet it. Everything else, you use steroids. They said, no, we've changed it now. It's actually, if it's wet, you use steroids. If it's dry, you use steroids, and everything else, you use steroids. That's what he said. This is John Chung. Some of you probably know him. He's a very funny guy, very godly man. But that's the thing, is that we usually use steroids for stuff like this. But I thought to myself, this is funny because it was on the right side of her body, the right side of her ear. How many of you are aware that your dominant side of your brain controls the opposite side of your body? Are you aware of that? Anyone understand that? But it's true from relationship standpoints. Your dominant side, your dominant relationship is going to manifest on your dominant side of your body. And for most of us, who's the closest relationship in our lives when we come into the world? Our mom, right? But after that, it's going to be our wife, our husband, stuff like that. For those of you who are more curious about this, you can talk to me later about it. But it was on the right ear, so I was kind of curious because we were not married at this time, right? And so I thought, is there some conflict with mom? No, there's not. But then I realized, where was the conflict between us? We had a disagreement. And my wife was very frustrated with me because I did not keep to what we had agreed on, right? So we talked it over. I asked her for forgiveness. And then after we did that, what happened? Were you able to sleep? So this is the ear the next day. It's faded significantly. And how much itching did you have after that? How did you sleep? So you slept fine. And so that's when I realized it's not always what you're eating, but what's eating you that can be causing the health problem. So my wife's weak point, like her difficult point, as well as her strong point, is skin. So this is her skin, and this is her wearing my alma mater. This is the Stanford logo where I went to residency and trained. And we posted this online, and what did one of my pastor colleagues say? He said, can you give us a picture without the bright lipstick? And I said, brother, there's no lipstick. There's not even foundation in that picture. That is just her skin. When her skin is clear, it is clear. But when there's difficulties, right, when it's not, it's not. That's what she just said right there. But perhaps people are looking for that magic formula. Do you know that supplements is a multi-billion-dollar industry? People will come to you and say, well, what supplement do I need to take? What am I missing? What you're missing isn't always here. It's not always what goes into your mouth, but what comes out of your mouth, right? So as we look at aging, that's just kind of a preview of what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. But as we look at our lives, have you heard the saying, once a man, twice a child? Did you know that dementia has come up to the top 10 causes of death now? It's risen tremendously to the top 10. I mean, not recently. I mean, they kind of push it off to 14, but I think the most recent data that's not quite out yet will show that it's going to be top 10. When we look at ourselves, no matter what we do, no matter how well we eat, no matter how much we exercise, all of us follow the same path. And if you think about it, it's very depressing what our end is. But there's hope. When they've looked at people's brains, when they die, they've found that people only fill about 3 to 5% of their total brain capacity. Have any of you heard that? It seems that our brain capacity is much larger than the, shall we say, 70 that many of us are given. That's from Psalm chapter 90, verse 10. David said, we live how many years? How much is 70? 70, or if by strength it's 80. So 70, 80 years. But when you look at the lifespan of most nations, it's about 70 to 80 years. Do you realize that? It's not changed much. Some of the longest lived people groups live longer, and that's what I'll be looking at, is it somehow seems that our brain capacity was designed for much longer, right? Anyone know who Dr. Benjamin Carson is? Probably one of the most renowned pediatric neurosurgeons, if not the most renowned pediatric neurosurgeon in the world. He perfected something called the hemispherectomy, where he would take out half of someone's brain, and that was a treatment for seizures that couldn't be controlled in any other way. And the kids who get that, they said, Dr. Ben Carson, best neurosurgeon. Anyone with half a brain knows that. It's true. But that's the interesting thing, is that you can actually survive on a very limited amount of brain structure because there's so much redundancy and the capacity isn't used. People estimate that with our brains, we have the capacity for perhaps 1,000 years or more. But maybe we were designed to live even longer than that. These people groups that I'm going to look at don't live forever, but do you remember this old article from National Geographic? This was way back when they started looking at this, so I decided to look into this myself. In fact, when we spoke at Campmeeting, actually earlier this month, we spoke at another camp meeting, what did we do on the way home? We interviewed a woman who was 104 years old. How long did her husband live till? 100. And so I tried to talk to her and say, what are you doing? How did you grow up? Things like that. And so I began this journey, and I'm still continuing this journey myself. So the first place we'll look at is Okinawa, Japan. Now, Japan in general lives a long time, just their baseline population. But when you looked at Okinawa, they lived a lot longer. When you look at their average life expectancy, it doesn't seem to be very long. It's only an extra 3-4 years from the baseline, but that is highly significant from a scientific standpoint. It's because they have a lot less heart disease, a lot less breast and prostate cancer. To give you an idea, does anyone know what the number one cancer is as far as deadly? What's the number one cancer? Kills more people than any other cancer. Lung cancer, right. But in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, do you think our number one cancer is lung? Why? Because we don't smoke, right? What do you think our number one cancers are? No, not stomach. Close. A little lower. Colon, right? So colon would be number one. So for generalized, populations, it would be lung, colon, breast, and prostate. So those would be the top three, killers as far as the cancers. What's interesting is, does anyone know what the number one cause of death is for all countries now, overall? Pretty much straight across the board. Heart disease, that's correct. So that's the number one killer. But what's interesting is a lot of people will say in first world countries, that's the case. But did you know now even in more developing countries, that is also the case? No, there's an exception to that. There's a Scandinavian country where their number one cause of death is not heart disease. Does anyone know what that country that is? Any epidemiologists here? It's Norway. Norway's number one cause of death. Ah, you knew it. Did you think it was Norway? Good job. Very well. So Norway's number one cause of death? Cancer, because it's number 2, right? Heart disease, cancer, stroke, right? Stuff like that. But actually people have found that the number 3 cause of death, at least recently, is heart attack or cardiovascular disease, cancer, then COVID. Did you know that? Interesting. Very interesting. I have my own thoughts about that. You can ask me later if you wish. But when you look at Okinawans versus Americans, they have mostly a plant-based diet, but they have something called ikigai. Anyone know what ikigai is? The translation in Japanese, it's the reason you get up in the morning, right? Ikigai, your purpose, your motive, your being, right? Why are you even on planet Earth, right? That's the question. Man's Search for Meaning. Do you remember that book? Anyone remember that book, Man's Search for Meaning? Right? Very, very important that you have ikigai. This is Fumiyasu. At 84, he is a participant in the Senior Olympics. His favorite event, the decathlon. His favorite part of the decathlon, the pole vault. Anyone know a pole vaulter? Anyone know a pole vaulter? You do. Are they 84? No, but Fumiyasu is. When the Okinawans have their cuisine, they get a lot of it from the gardens. They eat more, but way less. And the reason why is because they eat nutrient-dense foods, but they don't have many calories, right? It's like my wife is a dietitian, by the way. Feel free to talk to her or ask her any food-related or other related questions. She'll always say that greens are a great bargain because they're nutrient-dense, but very few calories. And America, she'll say, is overfed, but undernourished. Have you heard that? So we have lots of calories, but many of them are empty calories. That's right. But not Okinawa. They get lots of bang for their buck, as we say. This is Serie Toguchi. He's enjoying lots of elements of longevity. He's getting exercise because he's working in his garden. He's getting fresh air. He's getting the nutrients from his garden. He's getting sunshine. And some people say, oh, if you're not getting out between 10 and 2, you're not getting anything. Have you heard people say that? You're just wasting your time. But that's not true. We're finding now it's not just about getting your vitamin D. Who's heard of infrared? Have you seen the data on infrared now? Very powerful, right? This is affecting your blood pressure, your blood sugar. It's actually being treating pain. Did you know that? It's unbelievable. So get outside and enjoy those things. But what's so funny is the interviewer didn't ask Serie Toguchi about any of those things. He said, Mr. Toguchi, why the red gloves? And he said, they're easy to find. True story. That was the interview. I'm not making it up. So the other concept in Okinawan longevity is their moai, which is a group of people who go through life together and help one another. And the moai is defined as a group of non-relatives that you spend time with at least 2 or 3 times a week. Does anyone here have a moai, a group of friends? Only like 3 or 4 people, not very many. The problem is that in the United States of America, we're very separate, right? In Asian culture, which Yin and I come from, I'm actually not full Chinese. As many of you can guess, I'm something else. Because some people would say, well, wait a minute, aren't you Chinese? I said, no, look at my last name. And they're like, were you adopted? I'm like, no. Where did you get your last name? From my father. It's true. My brother is 2 inches taller than me. He looks Caucasian. My sister looks kind of Hispanic. People come up to her speaking Spanish. She's like, I'm not Spanish. So that's the thing is, although I look more Asian, I'm actually Eurasian. But Yin is 100% Chinese. And in these Asian sort of cultures, where does the family and extended family live? They live together, right? They might have a separate wing, like, of the house, but they live together. And that's what we've lost, I think, in our society in many ways. But the Moai support one another physically, like financially, socially, spiritually. If you're in a place where you know somebody has your back, you feel at peace there. But unfortunately, Okinawa has succumbed to the Western ways of not only thinking, but of their lifestyle. And they have, in fact, found the moniker of doom, the Golden Arches. They have adapted a more Western style of eating rather than their traditional Okinawan-based culture. Let's go to Silanus in Sardinia. Where is Sardinia? Italy, right? I used to go like this with my friends, Italy. Say, no, don't ever do that because you're mad at somebody when you do that. That's an angry symbol in Italian. Don't do that. But in this culture, you'll meet shepherds like Tonino. And when he's 74 years old, he still works from sunup to sunset, repairing fences, splitting wood, and he only needs the help of a little cane. In the Sardinian way, the family is number one. And every week, the entire family gets together for a huge meal. The patriarch here is 103 years old. How many people can tell me who lives longer, men or women? Now, did you know in Sardinia, men live as long as women? Isn't that interesting? Very fascinating, as a matter of fact. Now, there's a lot of theories as to why that is, but how many of you can tell me that you see everyone related to you once a week? Raise your hand. One person. Wow, not that many. So this is a tradition in Sardinian culture, connection with those who are related to you. Now again, some of us have relatives that are a little bit, shall we say, taxing on us. Now I would say you still need to love and hang around them, but make sure you charge up first with your moai, your group of people who you get that energy from, so that you can give them that help or support that they need. But the concept is this, and what did we figure out the last hair that I harvested from yesterday? What was that from? Connecting with family. Now, these are family members that I have never met. Yes, this is the first, right? I met 5 different relatives, and when had I met them before? Never. So that was a huge thing that actually turned a gray hair that I found back to black. So here is another concept of Sardinian culture, Giuseppe, right? That's a great Italian name, Giuseppe. Giuseppe's 85, and hopefully he won't eat this because he's going to definitely lose a few years if he eats that. But the interviewer asked Giuseppe and said, Giuseppe, you're 20 years older than the average retiree. I mean, don't you ever feel tired? You want to stay home? Some of these days you still go to work. And you know what his answer was? If I stayed home all day, then I'd be sick. Isn't that kind of the opposite of the way we think about things? When you look at the Sardinian culture, they're not so much afraid of burning out as rusting out. Do you realize that? Very important. The Sardinians have an advantage, though. Their soil has much more antioxidants in it than the mainland Italian soil. So their grapes have 300% more quercetin and resveratrol. Who's heard of those words? Interesting, quite a few of you, that's great. Those are the compounds that they believe are protecting us from heart disease. And that's where the concept of, have you heard of the French paradox? Does anyone know what the French paradox is in the medical literature about heart disease? Who knows what the French paradox is? Nobody. Wow, okay. So the French paradox is this. So the French eat a lot of animal products, okay? Meat, cheeses, right? Anyone been to France? Anyone been to France? A few people, right? Cheeses, right? And they have a lot less heart disease, though, than Americans. So they tried to figure out why. And they found that the French were consuming large amounts of this resveratrol and quercetin, and you know where they were getting it from? Their wine. So then they started to push and say people should drink moderately. Did you hear that? That's actually disproven now. My alma mater at Stanford showed that the alcohol was not responsible for it. It was the actual grapes. And the resveratrol and the quercetin is found just under the skin of those fruits. So if you want the antioxidant advantage, then consume a Pinot, a Gewürztraminer grape, not a glass of wine. In fact, what's very interesting is recent data, within the last 10 years, in fact, there was a big study in the United Kingdom. They looked at alcohol and longevity, like death from every cause. And they found that 100 grams of alcohol per week shorten your lifespan significantly, as well as larger amounts. To give you an idea, how much is 100 grams of alcohol? Most of you won't know, probably, since most of you are Seventh-day Adventists. But 100 grams of alcohol in a week, yes, correct. It's not even one drink a day. He's correct. A drink would be a beer, a glass of wine, or a shot of whiskey or hard liquor or something like that. So 100 grams of alcohol is very, very little amounts of alcohol. And the World Health Organization, how much alcohol do they recommend, babe? 0. I don't agree with everything from the WHO, the World Health Organization, but on that, they got it right. Anyone heard of Mayo Clinic? Anyone heard of Mayo? Minnesota, Rochester, right? So in their wellness letter, they don't recommend any alcohol for people under age 50. Now, I think I would recommend it not at all, right? But what they found in this study about alcohol is that people who did drink moderately did shorten their lifespan, but the way they died differed. The drinkers usually died from non-fatal strokes. The non-drinkers died from fatal heart attacks. How would you want to go? Stroke, lasting for several years, non-fatal, remember? Or would you rather die of a fatal heart attack? Who would pick the fatal heart attack? Who would pick the non-fatal stroke? See? Nobody, right? So not just the length of life, but the way that you die is also affected by the consumption of alcohol. But when you look at Sardinia, obesity is now affecting about 10 to 20% of them. What percent of America is obese? Anyone want to wager a guess? Whoa, 60. It's not that high, thankfully. Higher than that. It's 42%. Now, overweight, you are correct. Whoever said around 60, but the majority of Americans are overweight. But that means greater than 10% higher than what you should be, right? 20% greater, that's obese, right? Then there's morbidly obese. There's even another category, right, that they're adding right now to obesity. Yes, exactly. There's another category even beyond that. So when you look at the 10%, that is high considering that, 20, 30 years ago, it was 0, So the other criticism of Sardinia is there's only 2,400 of them, so it's like, can you really make any conclusions about just 2,400 people? And the real question is, well, what about me? I'm not Sardinian, I'm not Okinawan, I'm not any of these things. Do I have a chance? Well, that was where my search came in. Dan Buettner is a researcher that looked at the zones of longevity, and he called them blue zones. Have you ever heard that saying? Who's heard that saying? Okay, lots of you guys. Fantastic. So I went to another longevity zone, which is, where's Nicoya? Costa Rica. Who said that? Very good. Absolutely. That's fantastic. I went there because I actually read, write, and speak Spanish fluently, praise the Lord. So when I looked at their cultures, they were wanting to celebrate their cultures of longevity. And here's kind of their summary in English of not just their diet, but their cultural sort of cohesiveness for not just the family. But I interviewed a lady that was turning 107 when I was there. And I had the opportunity to talk to her. And I said, well, when can we come over and see you? Anytime. I'm always home between such and such. Hey, I said, can I bring you some food? Sure. What can I bring you? Bring me anything. He was very easygoing. I loved it. And I said, would you like me to help you eat? She says, no, I can eat and feed myself. Thank you. She was so polite. She was funny. And she was turning 107. Amazing. Her daughter had just moved in, like I think 2 or 3 years before, to help her out with stuff. But other than that, she had been living independently. Unbelievable. There's another longevity zone in Greece. Does anyone know where it is? I'll give you a hint. It's the Greek legend that flew too close to the sun. Icarus, but Icaria is the name of the island, right? So Icaria is the zone there, and that's yet to be. I haven't interviewed anyone there yet, so I haven't added it yet to the talk. But the last place I'll go has one of the worst air qualities in the entire United States. Anyone know? Southern California, Loma Linda, where we'll meet groups of happy seniors. One of their champions, Marge Jatan. Does anyone know what her profession was? She was a nurse. Anyone know what her husband was? Physician. How long did he live? 98. Not quite 100, but we'll talk to a physician who did live beyond that, one of my mentors. So Miss Jatan, when she was 100 years old in this picture, renewed her driver's license. And they said, Miss Jatan, we are not going to renew it for the 10 years. You're only going to get 5. When she turned 105, she renewed it again. Dr. Frank Shearer is another element of this group. He is a physician and has outlived the rest of us docs by several decades, but he, at the time of the article, was one of the longest-lived water skiers on planet Earth. Anyone water ski or know somebody who water skis? Are they 100 years old? No, right? One of my professors at Loma Linda, where I trained for medical school, was none other than Dr. Ellsworth Wareham, cardiac surgeon at 91. Now, let me ask you this question. Honestly, answer honestly. Would you allow a 91-year-old surgeon to do open heart surgery on you? But you know what I would say? Dr. Wareham, absolutely. You know why? I was in the operating room with him as a medical student. And I remember being impressed. Yes, he was a very godly man and a skilled surgeon, but I was so impressed with how calm he was. I mean, we would have people coding and dying, like bleeding out. And I remember Dr. Wareham, he would give orders like this, clamp there, ligate there, cut there, suction there. Like very calm orders. And I asked one of the lead physicians, and I said, can you tell me why Dr. Wareham is so calm in the OR? Frankly, Dr. Wareham has been doing open heart surgery longer than all of us have been alive. And that is why he is so calm, because he's seen all the complications already, right? Lydia Newton, at the time of this article, was 112, and she was one of the top 20 longest-lived people on the place of on planet Earth. Now, people will ask, is this good genes? Is it divine intervention? Well, people will say God may or may not have to do with their longevity, but their religion does. And that person who said that was the writer of that article, David McLean. And of course, this longevity zone, who am I talking about? The Adventists, that's right. Now, the Adventists aren't a small group, but they're relatively small as far as world religions. 20 million, a little bit more than 20 million Seventh-day Adventists around the world. Now, we come from all cultures of life. I did not grow up as a Seventh-day Adventist, but I can tell you, best decision I ever made, other than marrying my wife, right? That's number 2, right? They come from all cultures, all races, but the common bond is their religion and lifestyle. So let's put all of these together. Plant-based diets, generally don't smoke, generally don't drink except for, like what you mentioned, the red wine in the Sardinian cultures. Family-oriented daily activity. I'm going to take a look at some secular articles that kind of pull this together as well. U.S. News and World Reports, is it a Christian publication? No, it's a secular publication. But they came up with all these habits to help you live to 100. Number 1, those who retire expire. Very important. Do not stop having a purpose. I'm not saying that you don't have to quit your paying job, but do something. Do something specifically with your gifts that help other people. I work in my job with 2 groups of elderly people. One group is very sick, my patients. The other group is very healthy, but they're the same age. Why the difference? One group is my patients, very sick. One group is my volunteers that are pushing them around in the gurney. Same age, older geriatric population, but they still have ikigai, right? They still have purpose and meaning, using their talents to serve others and to help them, right? How many people knew that flossing lengthened your life? How many people knew that? Wow, not as many people as I thought. So flossing, the way that works is you'll get about 2 extra years of life if you floss regularly versus people who don't floss regularly. And this is the way it works. This is the theory, okay? When you have not flossed for a while and then you floss, what happens? Your gums bleed because they became inflamed, right? And that's the concept, is that they were inflamed before. But if you floss regularly, do they bleed? No, they don't, right? I'll give you an experiment, and you'll figure out why this is going to cause you problems. Don't floss for a while. In fact, get something stuck between your teeth. Let it sit there for a few days. Floss it out, and then smell it. Ew! What does it taste like? What does it smell like? It's like nasty, isn't it? It's like poop, right? It's true. I'm just saying, right? But that's been sitting in your mouth that whole time, and your body's like absorbing that. So that's the theory, is you've got to get that decaying matter out of your mouth, because if your gums are inflamed, it's going to take all that bacteria into the bloodstream and cause inflammation in the coronary. So that's the theory as to why people have this longer longevity when they floss. And here's the thing, is people will tell me, well, flossing is not part of the Seventh-day Adventist health message or the writings of Ellen White. And I said, yes, but listen, the health message is what? Simple, available, and cost-effective, right? Those 3 principles are present in all of the messages of the Adventist church. And here's what I tell people. Is flossing hard to teach? Is it cheap to do? Yeah. Can anyone do it? I'll tell you right now, even if you don't have any floss, you can just reach down into your sock right now, pull out a piece of... Okay, sorry about that, ladies. I know you're going to hate me for that because now I've destroyed your laundry, right? But I'm just saying that it's simple to do. You don't have to have a PhD or an MD or some D to figure out how this is working. And that's the concept, right? If there is a God, and if that God is benevolent, it should be easy. Health should be available for all. And of course, I believe in God, but even if someone is struggling with that concept, you could share with them, but if a God was loving that existed, wouldn't he make this available for everybody? Sure he would. How many people like investments? How many people like investing their money? How many people like a good investment, a good return on their investment? What if I told you you could invest at 300% or 400%? What would you think about me? Oh, really? Some of you are willing to do that. Some people would say, is this crypto? Or is this kind of scam, right? Wouldn't they wonder? Because that's crazy. I mean, if you're getting 10, 12%, you're doing phenomenally. I mean, you're doubling your money every 7 years. Do you realize that? That's craziness. But did you know that every hour that you exercise, you will live that hour over again and 2 or 3 hours on top of it? And a lot of people wonder, and they say, well, what's the question? What kind of exercise, right? What I tell people, it's very simple. The kind that you will keep doing the rest of your life. That's what I want you to kind of dissolve into your mind from this, because people who do sports in school tend to be more active later, but it depends on the type of sport that they do. People who are runners, people like swimmers, cross country, stuff like that, they tend to be active the rest of their lives, because how many people do you need for that? Just you, right? People who play football or basketball, it tends to be harder for them to stay active because you need more people. Does that make sense? So I would tell people, if you're doing activities such as gardening, walking, swimming, right? you're going to stay active because you don't need somebody else to do that. I'll give you a very practical way to get more exercise. How many of you, when you go to the store, you drive around for 5 minutes looking for the very closest parking space, right? Don't do that. Just park, right? And go do your shopping during the daytime so you feel safe. Does that make sense? How many people have you seen somebody go to an elevator, push the button just to go down one floor? Don't do that, right? Take the stairs, right? Get that extra movement and activity. What's the most important meal of the day? Breakfast. Did you know that breakfast is related to learning for children? Academic success? But now we found that breakfast is related to longevity. If you eat a fiber-rich breakfast, you will live longer. Did you know that? Here's how it works. You will control your blood sugar not only for that meal, not only for that day, but actually live longer the rest of your life. How many people are enjoying the meals? Yay! Thank you, Heidi and your crew, to whoever's watching. We've enjoyed my wife is a vegan and gluten-free, so we've enjoyed the options that they've given us. How many people here can say they sleep routinely 6 or more hours a night? Not everybody. That's too bad. It's very important to sleep. But the problem is a lot of the studies on sleep were done on men. Did you know how much sleep women need? It's actually more. How did you know that? That's very good. Yes, women actually need more sleep than men. That was important. My wife has injured her back, so I allowed her to have the princess morning today. So I went and I got the food from the cafeteria. I brought it back. I went lunch. Brought it back and stuff like that. And let her relax because we've been traveling. Yin knows we had a canceled flight, but they never just cancel your flight. They'll say, it's delayed, it's delayed, it's delayed. Oh, and then it's canceled, right? And they did the same thing the next day. It was delayed, delayed, delayed. Oh, no, you're going to fly. But we didn't even leave our connecting city till 12:30? We didn't get in here till like 2. It's like wild. And of course, our time zone is somewhere on the West Coast. We left it behind there a few days ago. So the sleep is very important. I'm going to share with you, I had a colleague of mine, real true story. He sent me an EKG on the phone, and I looked at it, and I said, I hope that this is not yours. He's like, what do you think? I said, this person's having a heart attack. He's like, it is mine, and I'm in the emergency department. I said, have they given you this? Are they taking you here? He said, yes. He's like, I shared it with my son, who's an eye doctor, and I'm like, well, I'm glad he told you to go to the ER. He's like, yes, he did. But this individual, lifelong vegetarian, normal cholesterol, no diabetes, never smoked, maybe a little high blood pressure, but well controlled. And this person was basically around the same decade of life as I am. But their issue was this. Anyone know what the big 4 risk factors for heart disease are? Anyone can name them by heart? By heart, haha, right? Blood pressure, go ahead. No. Blood pressure? No. High cholesterol? Diabetes, who said that? Good. And then the last one? Hopefully something that none of you do. Smoking, right? But then they added sedentary lifestyle. Then they added obesity. Do you know what the American Heart Association added most recently to the risk factors? Who said sleep? Who said sleep? That's correct. How did you know that? Yes, that's right. The people who are paying attention usually get the right answers. Did you get good grades in school? You did. I knew it. You're a smarty. That's great. So sleep. This friend of mine, he does so many mission trips, he'll schedule a full day of patients and then fly out on the red eye. When he comes back in, he'll come in early morning, have a full day of patients. So sleep, very important, because that's when you regenerate, that's when you heal. So hopefully you know that eating whole foods is very important for you. I won't reiterate on that. My wife is that's her area. But I want to mention, many people will say, but what should I take as a supplement, right? And what I tell people is there was a study in Finland, and they did it on smokers. And if you smoke, what are you going to get? Lung cancer, right? High blood pressure, lots of other things too. So lung cancer is what they looked at. But they did 3 groups, not 2 groups. One group, they smoked, and they did nothing else. That's the control group. The second group, they smoked, but they took antioxidant foods, vitamin A, C, E, and selenium. What's high in vitamin A? Carrots, right? What's high in vitamin C? Citrus, right? What's high in vitamin E? Everything. I wish. That'd be great. Vitamin E is like seeds, different grains, right? What's high in selenium? I heard Brazil nuts, grapes, so that's pretty good. So Brazil nuts is very high in selenium. That's correct. So the third group, they had take supplements in equal amounts of the foods that the second group was eating. And the first group, they followed them. What do you think they developed? Some of them. They got lung cancer. And the group that ate the foods, do you think they got less lung cancer, more lung cancer, or the same? Less. Okay, the supplement group got more. And they told them to stop taking it. Now, I'm not saying that's a typical study, but if you'll talk to my wife, when you look at nutrients, they're in balance. What's a common supplement that many women take? Iron. Why do they take iron? Anemia, right? But did you know that they've taken iron out of all multivitamins? Who's aware of this? Anyone aware that that's very interesting. You're one of the few people who knows this. Do you know why they took it out of multivitamins? It was iron, but it was specifically the poisoning. That's right. You've got a little boy there. So these kids would take handfuls of Flintstones, and they'd overdose, and what killed them was the iron. But what they found is if you supplement with iron, you actually shorten your lifespan. Did you know that? How many people were aware of this? One person in the back was aware of that. Interesting. Do you know what the next nutrient is going to be under fire that they're going to take out of multivitamins? I'll give you a hint. Has any of you ever had a coronary risk score or a CT, a very high-res CT of your heart? Do you know what we're looking for? Calcium. That's correct. That's going to be the next one on the firing block. Not quite gotten there yet, but they're finding that this calcium that deposits creates a high-risk plaque. As a bonus question, anyone know what creates the highest risk plaque? Calcium present in it, but there's something recent that was just last year. No, actually, it's more than a year ago. It's a year and a half ago now. It was in New England Journal. They took a sample from your carotids and your heart, and they did a molecular analysis on the plaque. And they found that half of the people had this, half the people didn't. It wasn't calcium. Who said plastics? No, it's plastics. Microplastics. Were anyone aware of this study? Anyone aware of the study? Oh, a few people in the back. So that's going to be a big toxin coming up. We're going to have protocols for pulling the plastic, and you can see what I'm drinking out of, right? Right. So number 7, type A personality. They tend to die prematurely. That's the leader type, driven, on time, the executive type A personality. But they found that only 2 of the personality components caused them to die prematurely. Does anyone want to guess what they were? Not stress, because stress can be good, right? Because you're not going to study for the final unless you have an exam, right? It was hostility or anger was one. Then the other was intolerance. So it's okay to stand firmly in your beliefs, but what do you do when people disagree with you, right? If you get angry or intolerant of them, that's going to kill you. Did you know that if you lose your temper for just a split second, for the next several hours, your risk of fatal heart attack goes up by 300 to 400%? The wrath of man does not fulfill the righteousness of God. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Because he knows that that's so toxic for you and I, right? That's so important. Okay, I have to confess, I changed the article a little bit. It says, live like a Seventh-day Adventist, but I'm just going to tell you, you can be a Seventh-day Adventist. It's okay. Look at all these empty seats, right? You're all welcome to become Seventh-day Adventists. Become a creature of habit. The people who live the longest, they get up, they go to bed, they eat, they exercise, they have a schedule. Do you realize that? They have a regular schedule. Well, people say, what about speakers? You guys travel. I mean, how many engagements do we have this year, babe? 30, maybe more? Are any of them international? Yes. So people say, how about speakers like you? You guys are changing time zones every month and stuff like that. And you know what I tell them? Listen, I'm tired. I get jet lag too. It hurts. But you know what? We're willing to give up some of our longevity to raise all of yours, right? Amen. So what I also want to share is be connected to the people around you. One of the things that I appreciated about one of my relatives that I just met, he's going to be a psychiatrist. He's doing pre-med right now. And Jack has this ability is he looks you right in the eye when he talks to you. He's connected. He's not on his phone. He's not distracted. He absolutely has learned this lesson. How many of you have a sister? Raise your hand. How many of you are close to that sister? Oh, good. Pretty much all the hands. That's good. If you're close to your sister, you actually have less lifetime depression, and you will live longer. Now, why it didn't work out for brothers, I'm not really sure why that study worked out the way it did. I mean, maybe we don't listen as well. I'm not sure. But that's just how it worked. But stay close to your family if they're not like toxic and things like that, but still reach out to them when you can. Number 10, who's heard of the marshmallow study? Marshmallow study. So the marshmallow study were researchers at Stanford, my alma mater. And the study was very simple. Little toddlers, okay? Little kids. Here's a marshmallow. You can eat it now, but if you wait till I come back, you get 2, right? Now, they made these kids wait 15 minutes. And you're like, come on, that's not very long. An average adult, that's like the researcher leaving for 8 hours and not telling you when they're coming back. What did many of the kids do? They ate the marshmallow. Some kids resisted, but then they ate the marshmallow. And a few kids, what do you think? They waited. And they followed these kids for decades. And they found that the ability to delay gratification was related to every positive outcome in your life. I'm serious. It wasn't just marital success. It was financial success, no jail time. It was like higher SAT scores. It was like everything was related to that. But they also found that there was personality traits that predicted longevity. And a lot of people say, well, the kids were positive, right? But you got to be careful. I could say, oh, that's just a mole on my hand, but it ends up being melanoma, right? So you have to have a realistic outlook and not be overly positive. But they found that the one personality trait that predicted longevity, anyone know? It was conscientiousness. Gratitude is positive, though, also. But conscientiousness. What does that mean? You say what you mean what you say, you follow through. When you do your workout, you don't go 1, 2, skip a few, 9, 10, right? You actually follow through. It's very important. And some people try to say, well, it's because they followed up with their doctors. Listen, I don't give myself that much credit. The greatest physician for your health is Jesus Christ. The second physician is yourself. The decisions that you yourself make, not necessarily what I'm telling you to do. So let's put it all together. What's the secret? Is it diet? What do you think? Did you know that there is a much more committed group, a religious group to vegetarianism than the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Anyone know who they are? Who says Hindus? That's right. Buddhists, also is correct. Do you know Brahmins? They're like the highest caste. They actually are supposed to be vegan and not use onion or garlic. Anyone aware of that? Anyone was aware of that? Actually, a few people. Wow, how do you guys know all this stuff? This is great. Yin, you've been doing a good job. Fantastic. Everybody knows. So it's not necessarily diet, and I'm not saying that plant-based diets are bad. I'm just saying it's not all. What about exercise? How many people think it's exercise? What do you think? Did you know the latest Adventist health study showed that less than 10% of Adventists exercise daily? Youch, youch, youch. It's got to be genetics though, right? Well, partially, but when you look at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they're from everybody. Do you realize they're from all cultures? And what's particularly important is if you look at high-risk populations in the United States, like African Americans, who have higher risks of diabetes, hypertension, when they become Seventh-day Adventists, their risk goes down. So that's not genetic, right? And here's what someone said, gratitude, optimism. No, it's conscientiousness, right? Well, what about faith in general? Let me tell you, if you're committed to whatever faith, you're going to get about 2 or 3 extra years, okay? A committed person to their religion is taking care of their conscience. That's very important. But what I want to share is it's not always that, because people will say, well, you don't smoke or drink or use caffeine as Adventists. Well, I'm afraid to tell you that many of us do use caffeine. Now, just FYI, that's unfortunate. But did you know there's another religious group that doesn't smoke or drink or use caffeine? Anyone know? The Mormons. But did you know they're not a longevity zone? They're not on, Anderson Cooper or National Geographic or Oprah Winfrey. They're not on those programs as longevity zones. And what I want to do is just kind of summarize this. God wants us to be healthy or not? What do you think? Sure he does, right? But are we always going to be healthy? No. Was Job a righteous man or an unrighteous man? Was he healthy? He was for a while, but he got really sick, right? So is it necessarily someone's religious fault if they get ill? Not necessarily true. Did you know that one of the greatest prophets was Elijah? Who was his successor? How did Elisha spend the last years of his life? He was sick, bedridden, yes. Did you know that? He was very sick. But was that because he wasn't righteous? So it's not always the case. Jesus in John 10:10 says that I am come that they might have, and that they might have it more abundantly, right? I want you to know the next time you see somebody with Botox or lip fillers or plastic surgery or whatever, I want you to understand that that person is not a bad person. That person is not an evil person. They're looking for what you and I are looking for. They're looking to come home. They're looking for longevity. But they're going about it a different way that's not healthy, right? Ecclesiastes 3:11, God has put eternity in our hearts. How many of you know that there's something in your life that could change for the better for your health and your lifestyle? Raise your hand. If you know of that thing and you'd like to say, God, here's this one thing that I want to either surrender to you or maybe start doing for you, and if you want to ask him for help, I want you to stand as we pray. Loving Father in heaven, I want to thank you that your Son came that we might have life and we might have it more abundantly. Thank you for the wisdom of these zones of longevity. Thank you for the interview that I've been able to have with many of them. And I just pray you see all of us standing. We know what we should do, Lord, but we don't lack information. We really lack motivation. We lack inspiration, and we need the transformation that only your Spirit can give. I pray whatever decision is being made in hearts right now, I pray that you would give them your Holy Spirit, give them strength and grace to follow through and to enjoy that life and enjoy it more abundantly in Jesus' name.